Well, welcome to the open meeting of the Education Commission and Quality Committee being held via Zoom, and welcome also to Alex, our Chief Executive. So Alex, welcome to coming along again. I know we see you at a number of meetings, but you're very welcome. And I understand Sian Richards, Director of Digital. Is Sian on at the moment? Can't see her. Okay, and we're expecting Sian and Craig as well. Is Craig Barker on? No, not as yet. So hopefully they'll be.
I am here.
He is.
Okay,
I'm here as well. Sorry, there was a few screen issues then.
Well, welcome to you both, and also to Simon Cassidy. I can't see Simon. Is Simon on?
Yes,
he is.
I'm here.
Still can't see you, Simon, but I can hear you. So welcome.
All right.
And also to Ainsley Bladden. Is Ainsley on? Oh, okay. David, maybe you'd let us know if you see him when he joins. And also Andrew Dalton from Audit Wales. So very welcome, Andrew. And Push, I think we're still awaiting Dr. Tom Lawson, aren't we?
We are, yeah. If he said he was hopeful of joining. If not, we can continue presenting that paper with myself and Anton. But I just felt ideally it'd be good if he was here. Okay. So in order for Tom to participate, if people are content, we will look at part 2 in a different order. And Lisa, just to give you the heads up that we will take your part of that session first and then come back to Push. Okay. Are there any apologies for absence? I haven't been made aware of any. David?
I haven't done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to item 1.3, declarations of interest. Anyone that has an interest in the university needs to declare their interest in respect of any agenda items. And I'll start by saying that I am a fellow of the University of South Wales. Okay. Any other declarations of interest? John?
I'm employed at Swansea University, Chair.
Thank you, John. Ruth?
I have an honorary chair at the University of the West of England, and I chair the advisory board to the Centre for Public Policy at Cardiff University.
Ruth? I can't see anybody else hand up. So
my hand's up, Chair.
Okay, yeah.
So I have an honorary chair at Swansea School of Medicine. And can I say Tom Lawson also has an honorary chair at the Cardiff School of Medicine, should he join us?
Okay. Okay, Margaret?
Sorry, I'm trying to put my camera on. I'm an honorary professor of School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Science at Cardiff.
Thank you, Margaret.
There we go.
Is that everybody? I can't see any more, David. Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Can we move on to item 1.4, which is the draft minutes of the ECQ meeting held on the 23rd of March. And if we can go to those, first of all, for accuracy on page 1. Can I just check that the same issue with regards to Lisa's listed as a fellow of the University of South Wales? That's not the case, and my name is not included on there, so that should be added as well. So if we could have that clarified. Okay, page 2. Page 3. Page 4. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so are people content to accept those as an accurate record? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the action log. 1.5, and I see that the action log, all the items have been completed and some of them are being addressed today. Is that right, David?
Yes, there's one item there under levelling up, and then I think this is providing a brief verbal update with regards to that at today's meeting.
Okay, do you want to take that now? Who's doing that? Is that Lisa?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Lisa.
In relation actually to this, we haven't actually got a report actually at this meeting, but obviously in terms of actually levelling up and widening access, this is obviously a key area that we have embarked upon. And if you recall actually in previous reports that we brought to the ECQC, it's how we're actually diversifying actually that access and levelling up. But we haven't brought a report to this meeting, but it's actually entailed actually within a number of our reports actually going forward. Do you need a specific report?
What do the committee feel? Is it necessary to have a specific report, or are you content with the content included within the papers?
I think it'd be useful to have a brief side, Chair, just a side of A4, just to close it down, to bring it together, if that's not too complicated.
That's something, therefore, we could circulate by email in between the meetings to members of the committee. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay,
it's just Push has got his hand up. Push, did you want to comment?
Yes, I wanted to comment on a different part of the action log, if that's okay.
Okay, if you could hold that just for the moment and I'll finish off the last bit. So David, if we could have that circulated with regards to the levelling up, and if there are any subsequent issues, then it can come back at a later date. Thank you. Push, over to you then.
So the second item on the agenda, on the action log about an example visit, I think we have provided something today, but I do think that there's an opportunity for a more detailed circulation of a visit that would be beneficial to the committee. And I've agreed that with Anton Seaman, that we will do something that gives you more of an idea of how a visit process happens. Conscious that with these visits having a confidential nature, that some of the information we can't put into the open discussion. So just to let you know that whilst that has been technically completed, I think that there's more that we could do, and I'm planning to do that before the next meeting, if that's okay.
Can I just ask the committee members what's your view on the opportunity for further detailed information and an overarching visit paper? You content with that?
Yes.
Okay, Push, that's fabulous if we can move forward with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
But people can hear me okay. I've got a bit of a source
Yeah,
of news.
Yes, can hear you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other points on the action log? No. Okay, thank you. So if I can go back to the minutes then, 1.6, any matters arising on page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Push, you've got your hand up. Is that an old hand?
Sorry, that's an old hand. Apologies.
Okay. 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Thank you. So we'll now move on to part 2, education performance and quality. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to change the agenda around slightly and hand over to you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, actually, Chair. As you can see, actually, what we've actually provided to you today is an update actually on the quality improvements, any identified risks and exceptions in relation to the nurse and health professional education. And actually this paper actually describes the work that's currently undertaken in a number of arenas in order to gain assurance about the quality of the education and training being delivered. It captures actually the recruitment to our distance and dispersed learning, and obviously highlights as well actually the Bangor University situation as well, in terms of they are on enhanced monitoring, and that is actually reported in this report, but is actually given actually members the update of where we are with it. Of key note actually, and I'm pleased actually that I've got Sian and Craig actually on the call today, is the work that we're being undertaken by the Education Task and Finish Group, which is chaired by Sian for the Director of Digital, into looking at fill rates. And I know we've actually got a separate paper actually looking at attrition, but obviously this particular paper will look at fill rates as well. So there are a number of actually issues in here actually, so I'm pleased actually to invite actually any questions, and obviously I've got a team actually with me here that can answer any of those queries.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the committee members? David? No?
Chair.
We lost the chair.
Is everything okay?
So no, has Tina dropped off?
Yeah, I think
No,
so.
Zoom is still working from here. We've still got everyone else, so I think it might just be the chairs. I'll resend the link across for them. Sarah, have you heard anything?
No, nothing.
Okay, it looks like it might be their connection because everybody else seems to be okay, but give me one moment and I'll resend the details.
Shall I phone her?
If you like, that might help. I'm just going to resend the link in case she's looking for it. Apologies.
The chair's trying to reconnect. So we can give her a couple of minutes.
There she is.
There we are.
Fantastic.
Hello.
Hey,
Apologies.
Welcome.
sorry.
I don't know what's going on with my computer, but anyway, I don't usually have problems, but I have had over the last week. So, sorry, Jill, did you advance the agenda at all, or where are we now?
No, I didn't advance the agenda. I just, we waited to see if you could reconnect first, but I did have a question, Chair, on Lisa's paper, if that's
Yes, go ahead, Jill. Yeah.
I guess it's probably a repeat of some of my previous questions in terms of the fill rates, and I know we've got a further paper, but it's all linked in some way, so I don't really mind when we answer the question, but this is about the financial impact of all these things, and it's a question that I probably will ask a number of times this morning or this afternoon as it is now, which is the financial impact of all these things. I think we probably need to have a little bit more detail about the effect of some of these poor fill rates, because as we know, there is a huge financial impact of not being able to fill the courses. And there's a couple in there, particularly the dispersed learning, that must have a significant financial impact. So maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but it's something I can push into the next session on attrition.
Okay. Now, Jill, actually, you're not barking up the wrong tree. I think it's actually quite an appropriate question to ask. And that's why it was important actually to identify the fill rates here for 2022-23. As you're aware, actually, with previous papers that we've brought here, and we have actually highlighted the anxiety that we had in terms of fill rates in September 23. So in other words, we recognised that they were reduced. And this is actually just an update on where we are. And it is recognised, the financial issue. So therefore, that's actually why we set up the task and finish group, actually in order to monitor that going forward, in order to actually evaluate really what the uptake actually was going to be during this current sort of fill rate session and going forward. So what I will say is that yes, we are very mindful of the anticipation of this. We don't know yet what the fill rate is going to be for this September, but the initiatives that we put in place in order to try and address and enhance that application and fill rate is quite considerable and is born from a number of our previous papers. I don't know whether Martin, do you want to add anything to that? Because it is something that we're looking at, and I'll bring Sian in terms of how the digital task and finish group is contributing to understanding that as well. Martin, anything to add?
No, not much really, Lisa. We just knew that if we relied on UCAS and the university traditional routes of recruitment, that we wouldn't get anywhere near our commission numbers and the numbers that the service need. So we've just set up these initiatives. We're monitoring them regularly. As you said, Sian's chairing the group and Craig's involved, and the team in sort of looking at the data as well. We're currently projecting we'll be 462 more than last year, which is a 24% increase on last year's commission numbers. But we're still working on all of these initiatives, and there's a lot of work to be done. I guess some of them may go down as well as up, but we're working really, really hard to get to the 2701.
And if you recall, Jill, there were a number of initiatives that we were taking forward with not only HEIs, but with health boards and further education colleagues. And we've done a lot of initiatives in the last few months in order to improve that recruitment rate into our pipeline as well. Sian, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, just to say that the Task and Finish group is looking at the academic year 23-24, and we're taking on board that how important it is about early warning and actually taking proactive mitigation against what the position, really understanding the position, having different conversations with the providers and looking at alternative mechanisms of the schemes that Martin has described to address some of the gaps. So it's twofold really, the excellent work that Martin and the team are doing on alternatives to the traditional, but also really understanding the data, looking at the data sources, looking at the way that we can really identify as early as possible where we do have gaps and what action can be taken. And that's leading to some interesting conversations with the HEIs about getting more data, different data and earlier data, and those are triggering earlier conversations. Also, to your point on the finances, we're linking this now with finance reporting. So part of the dashboard and the reporting links into the finance position at the earliest opportunity. So whilst, yeah, we are tracking an improved position and there's some positivity around the position, we do also appreciate that won't be 100% for the next year. And therefore, we're working very closely, and we've got finance reps on the Task and Finish group to make sure that we're cited early as possible about what the potential position is and the impact on the finances. So it is joined up across the operational, the data, the digital and the finance team about really getting an earlier warning of the position and then amending those initiatives as we understand. And this is a assurance should be taken that we've done a lot this year, but it's also a fantastic platform to build on for the following year as we understand the trends and the further reporting that we'll have in place and some more historical data to inform it as well for the year after.
Thanks. Thank you, Sian. I'm not quite sure whether it was Ruth or John come up because I was probably when I was off. So if I take John first, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Lisa, can I thank you for the paper and your team? I thought the paper was very helpful, I have to say. Can I ask one, I guess, quite a fundamental question? And I know we've discussed it in other meetings, but if it just to help me to understand our strategic approach to this and perhaps gain some assurance that what we're doing is taking us in the right direction. And that relates to dispersed learning and distance learning. If we look at the table, on the table that you provided at the start of the paper, if my memory serves me correct, because I think it was dispersed learning was 4% that we've recruited to, and I think the other one was 11% in terms of a fill rate. Now, to me, that is very significant. It just begs the question whether our strategy of a multifaceted approach to recruitment, particularly in those areas, whether it's right, are we doing the right thing? I note within the paper, which was helpful, around the work with a colleague Drindod, I think it was, and many of the other FE colleges, and the level 4 work into their streams. But of course, that's only going to be a small element of it. So I guess my question is, I just need some assurance that the interventions that we're putting in place will facilitate 100% or close to fill rate. And if not, are we having any conversations as to whether this is a key element of our multifaceted approach to recruitment?
I'm going to bring Martin straight in because actually this is an area that we are concerned actually about, John. I think the response to actually developing dispersed and distance learning was actually to look at the needs actually of especially our rural communities. And that was actually working with our health boards to understand how we could encourage people actually from that local community to come onto some of our programs. But you're absolutely right, and we've actually have declared it actually in this paper that we've actually been quite disappointed actually that the uptake has not been as high as we could be. And it is something that we will actually evaluate because it is something that if it is not working and it does not meet the needs of that population, we will obviously revisit this again. But let me bring Martin in because there's been a lot of conversations with Powys, with actually sort of Hywel Dda and actually the FE colleagues, colleges in order to how we can enhance this actually going forward. Martin.
No, thanks. It's really good questions because we were disappointed with the uptakes on these, obviously, because we were particularly excited about the dispersed learning contracts. We've done a lot of work with Power and Bangor University, and they've done a really big marketing campaign. We're confident that they're going to get about 30 at least out of the 35 for dispersed learning for 23-24. And I've asked Bangor to write up lessons learned and to identify the type of student that they're now attracting onto those programs, to share that with Swansea University and Hywel Dda, who, like Bangor in the first year, really struggled to find the market to recruit onto this program. We think we've now got it with Bangor, and we're going to be sharing that with Swansea and Hywel Dda to see if that works. In terms of the distance learning, it's true that it's not really captured, the full-time course has not captured the imagination, and the marketing around that didn't work in the first year. Bangor have re-looked at the sort of students they can recruit onto that program, and they're doing a different targeted marketing campaign. In response, we've gone out to tender for part-time distance learning provision because that was missing in Wales and the health boards were crying out for it. So we have now gone out for part-time distance learning provision out to tender. We're out at the moment for that. Well, it's actually closed and we'll be doing the evaluations, which will really enhance the opportunities for staff in Wales to learn on a distance learning programme. But we are looking at that full-time distance learning programme because we just need to be honest about it. We're giving it another year to see how it goes. We've challenged Bangor around the marketing of it, and it might be we might need some difficult discussions in the future about reducing the numbers, or do we carry on with that contract? But I think after 1 year and the challenge, it's too early to make any of those decisions, but we will certainly be reporting in regularly to the execs around updates around that course.
And that, John, is actually why we're evaluating them quite closely, so to understand what is working, what isn't working. But you're right, actually, it is taking that actually difficult, a strategic decision to say, if it isn't working, what else actually can we actually invest in it instead?
And that's essentially what I'm alluding to. It's a strategic question for vote in terms of, okay, we've tried it. It doesn't seem to be capturing a market. Our ambition is to maximise commissions. And that's where I think the paper was very helpful in enabling us to appreciate, well, this is the divergence that we're dealing with at the moment. So we need to ask those strategic questions. I agree that perhaps let's wait 1 year and look at lessons learned, Martin. So I think that's helpful. But I think at some point we need to ask some fundamental questions around this area of investment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Ruth?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad that John's raised this, because it was the one thing that struck me from the paper, and it reminded me of some of the reported experiences that that we've heard in Glyndŵr and also in Bangor. From people who've been involved in those programs, about the difficulty of sustaining commitment over a period of time. And so it will be really interesting to hear feedback as we get more reports on how this moves forward. I did want to ask another question, which is about the bursary. And I note from the paper that Welsh Government is setting up a group. And my comment is, it does actually seem a little bit late in the day, given that this is an issue that's been rolling for so long. And also to say that it's becoming more and more urgent to know where we're going with this in the context of what becoming such difficult circumstances for many people around Wales with cost of living crisis. So there may not be an answer, and that's maybe where we're at, but I wanted to express concern about it.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Lisa, is there any likely update on the bursary agenda coming forward? Because I understand Scotland and Northern Ireland are also reviewing this, and of course England doesn't have the same agenda, but is that something that can come back to the committee?
Yeah, so just to confirm, so Welsh Government have actually set up a bursary programme board to review the bursary. That has actually been meeting since last year. And I will sort of report that there is a meeting proposed for this Wednesday coming, where we hopefully will have further information to hand. There is a proposal that they will go out to consult on the bursary. What they've been doing so far is they've been engaging with a variety of groups in order to understand what questions they need to ask as a course of the consultation. Now, that programme board is made up of members from a variety of backgrounds. There's health boards, there's partnership forums, there's also the HEIs, as well as members within government as well. It is an area that's being raised as a concern in a number of arenas. So what I can say, Tina, is that obviously we're hoping to learn more on Wednesday as to what the next steps are going to be. And we can probably then hopefully bring something back to the next meeting. Up until now, there's very little that we've been able to report differently. The one thing I would caution members about is that if there are proposed changes, they may take longer than we anticipate to put into place, because obviously our HEIs are currently working and starting to think about potentially next year, in other words, September 24. So there may be a timescale where any changes may take time to introduce as well. But I can see Alex has got her hand up as well, and wants to add, could add to that as well.
Okay, Alex, is it on this point? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So just to reassure the committee that we do raise this as a risk whenever we have the opportunity, for example, in our joint executive team meeting with Welsh Government, because I think the first time that we raised suggestions that this policy needed to be reviewed was over 3 years ago. As Lisa has alluded to, the timeline for implementing any change is years, because most of the changes would probably need some kind of policy or legislative change. Would certainly need to be signed off by the minister. I think our concern at the moment is that we need a dual pronged approach. So we do need to understand what students are looking for. That's obviously really, really important, that students are supported by whatever system we put in place. And at the moment, clearly they are being let down by the system because they aren't able to secure as much maintenance funding as other students on student finance are. So that's a real challenge, I think, for our health professional students. But also, I think we do have to make sure that government is looking at this in terms of a commissioning perspective as well, because, and I think that's our concern at the moment, is the focus is wholly on students and student experience and not on what the benefits and requirements are really of a commissioning approach in what is a small country with a small group of universities, and the benefits that brings us in being able to actually manage the market a bit. So things like geographical access to provision, Welsh language, other requirements that are aligned with Welsh policy, we do then have a lever, not to mention the quality issues that we obviously focus on in this committee. So I think we feel at the moment that that angle on what might be the options for the future is not being fully considered, and that's something that we have written in about to emphasise.
Thanks, Alex.
And just to add to that, Tina, as well, that programme board has been provided with a lot of information as to what the other countries are doing as well. So there are comparisons being drawn as to what is being implemented elsewhere and now being evaluated too. So I think they are taking heed of that. But as Alex says, we've actually written in quite a number of times really to put our points across.
Okay, thanks. I think there's some really important points, and maybe this is a matter for discussion at board as well in relation to the effect it would have on us achieving what we've set out in the workforce planning going forward. I think given where we are and what you've already said, there are evidences within England where they halted the bursary, where it did affect students coming into training. So if that's all being considered, I think it's something that we might want to look at from the board perspective. Sian, apologies for keeping you waiting. Over to you.
No, that's fine. It links more to John and Ruth's point, but does touch a bit on the point of Alex and Lisa, is that we are now being able to track all of our students through dashboard reporting against the Welsh index of multiple deprivation, and that includes domains such as employment, housing, health, community safety, physical environment. So we are getting a proportion of what scale they're on against that recognised index and being able to map them. And I think that information will start to help us understand the population, to triangulate some data and give us a more robust understanding of our population, I think, which will help as a mechanism of making some of those decisions of where our population of students come from and how we are attracting different groups of people into different courses. And maybe we didn't have that level of analysis previously. And I think knowing that will certainly help some of our decisions about where we've got the cohort of students and what we need to target next. And if some of those decisions are made differently, I think it will help a level of information that maybe wasn't considered as much previously.
And Charlotte, is that going to come back eventually to the executive team and then for the executive team?
Yeah, so
when it comes to board?
The executive team have seen an early view of the dashboard as to make sure that we're on the right trajectory around that. And then this will be published and be available also to the executive team, and it'll be a part of the decision making. I should have said also that it also includes ethnicity around that as well. So it also ticks some of the stuff around the race equality and some of the other work that we're doing. So it's going to be a really helpful data source, and we will increasingly be using it as a method of decision making.
Okay, Alex, did you want to come back? Oh, your hand's still up. I can't see any other hands up. Quite an important discussion there in relation to the bursary and the effect it can have on future recruitment across the board. So I'm just wondering if the committee are happy that we keep this on the agenda for the September meeting and ask for an update in relation to that, Lisa? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And following on from that, then the discussions had with no doubt Alex and the chair as to how we might want to progress this at board level, because there is a responsibility to ensure that we're commissioning appropriately. But if our hands are tied in certain areas, then we need to make that overtly in the outside agenda from informing our colleagues at Welsh Government. Okay, so is there anything else from your paper, Lisa, that you wanted to comment on?
Nothing particularly. No, it's fine.
Okay, no further questions. So we are, as a committee, asked to note the contents of this report. Okay. Push, where are we with regards to your section now? You're on mute.
We should continue, Chair. I've had a message from Tom that the clinic is carnage, as he's described. Yeah. So Anton and myself will carry on, if that's okay.
Okay, so 2.1 then, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So the paper, as you know, this is a regular update and an exception report of issues of quality within medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, and optometry as a new report that is submitted to the committee today. Just to say that all of the medical decisions that are made are subject to scrutiny and support from the General Medical Council's own governance systems, and they're satisfied with all the decisions we've made that are reported in today's paper. So I'll concentrate on medicine to start with, if that's okay. So in the quality impact section, it tells you what we've been doing more recently in our commissioning program, our commissioning meetings. We have an annual meeting with all of our education providers, and so far we've met with 5 of them. There are 4 left, and so far that there's been a number of themes that have come through around equity of rotation placements, and a few other things about funding across the patch as well. So we're going to take those on board, and later on the year you'll have an overarching report on the outcome from these commissioning meetings. So those are ongoing. There were some recruitment risks that were reported at the last Education Committee and Quality Committee in relation to radiology. Happy to report that none of the radiology trainees required any extension that we potentially anticipated, and there was therefore no financial consequence of that. And the same applied to foundation applications. There was no longer an oversubscription once the figures were all sorted. In the quality management section, there's a number of areas that that I wish to highlight. So medicine in Wrexham, there are some discussions about this because we are on the border of thinking that it can come out of enhanced monitoring, but we need to have some discussions with the GMC about this, and that as parcel of our normal working with them. There has been some significant improvement, and so we are reasonably content, but there are still remaining challenges. What we don't want to do is take them out and then have to put them back in again. So we're going to have some discussions with the GMC on that. Emergency medicine in Wrexham, however, has come out of enhanced monitoring due to the improvements that they've made. So that is a positive development for Wrexham. Trauma and orthopedics, I know it says no change in the trajectory, but last Friday, following a visit there, we have recommended that they also come out of enhanced monitoring due to the improvements that they have made. Medicine in Iron Bevan University Health Board has had a reduction in its risk rating because of the actions that they've taken on rotas. There is an ongoing issue here, however, in that that they have had a number of resignations from their training posts, partly in relation to the poor outcomes that they were having previously. So it remains in enhanced monitoring, and whilst it's reduced its risk rating, it's somewhere we've still got a bit of work to do. So that's with the enhanced monitoring areas. In those high risk concerns, there is some areas that I'd like to highlight, and particularly in clinical radiology in University Hospital Wales. What's been apparent there is that with the development of the trauma centre, the workload for our radiology trainees has been significantly increased, and for the radiology department has been significantly increased. And there's been some concerns that this has had an impact on training, so we're keeping a close eye on that. The other area that I'd like to just highlight is the number of concerns that have arisen recently in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, in emergency medicine, medicine, and in surgery and intensive care medicine. So with this happening, we're concerned that any one of those, if not all of them, could potentially end up in enhanced monitoring. So what we propose to do is have a working group like we did in Iron Bevan, and with their medical director and their education team to try and address all of these areas in one forum. We think that that will be a worthwhile way of proceeding, and I know that their medical director and their AMD from education would support that, and I know that they're already well engaged with us. So that's something I wanted to highlight. Emergency medicine in Morrison Hospital is still at a high risk. However, we are aware that it was de-escalated from enhanced monitoring recently, and it will carry on being monitored and in a routine manner. So that's the bit from medicine. So I'm just going to stop there to see if there's any discussions that the board wish to have about this, the committee wish to have about this part.
Okay, are there any questions? I know Lisa's got a hand up. I don't know.
Sorry, old hand.
Jill?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Push, because I got a couple of questions on the next papers. In terms of trauma and orthopedics, Morriston, is the money in the budget for the 3 clinical fellows that all assist all this programme?
It's not in our budget.
No, I didn't mean in our budget. Sorry, I mean, the problem is always what the health boards have got in their budget.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the detail of that, but because the visit was only last Friday.
Okay.
So
I'll let you off then.
So I haven't scrutinised that report in that much detail. I just saw that it had come out of enhanced monitoring, so I was quite pleased about that. So I will see the details of that, but I would imagine that they have. The one thing about trauma and orthopedics training is it is always highly competitive and always filled. So there's always people who are looking for posts which are allied to a training unit. So I don't think they'll have difficulty in appointing to those. And it would be in the interests of the health board to fund clinical fellows, because having them on the rotas will also reduce their agency costs. So I think it's a win-win for everybody for that to be funded.
Okay. Perhaps you could confirm once you've had an opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any other I can't see any, David. Can you on your screen? No. Okay. Okay, Bush.
Yeah, so I'm going to deal with optometry next, if that's okay, because I'm the only person who's going to speak to that. And then I'll come to the dental and pharmacy ones after that, if that's okay. So optometry is undergoing a fair number of changes to its activity. There's no ongoing governance issues as things stand, but we will be developing a new model of what's called advanced training practices, which we haven't had previously. So we're looking at identifying practices which would give the advanced skills, or provide the environment for advanced skills for optometrists to gain in things like glaucoma treatment as independent prescribers, and other skills that that would help them in supporting the eye care plan. So a business case, a paper went to execs to support this, and it's funded from Welsh Government's allocation to us. So that's the first thing that's going to be implemented. The postgraduate qualifications are also going to be increased in number for optometrists to match this. A 6% increase in independent prescribing, as I say, 40% increase in glaucoma, and low vision services for optometrists and dispensing opticians is also going to be increased. So there's quite a bit of activity going on alongside that. In the past, from a quality perspective, the pass rates for the qualifications that we've commissioned in postgraduate optometry have had a very high pass rate, so that's encouraging. The concern is that once they've acquired those skills, is that the path to actually implementing them, to either get the experience, has been difficult to obtain because it often requires secondary care placements, which has been difficult to agree with our organizations. The advanced training practices will help with that, because they'll be able to have the supervised placements in those areas. So that's why that's a key a change in how we're going to look after the postgrad optometry training. And there's also changes in regulations which allow non-medical sign-off of some of these skills. So that's a brief summary of where we are with optometry and where we're developing the roles for that within the wider eye care plan. So can I stop there and see if there's any questions on that?
Any questions at all? Ruth?
It's not a question. I just really wanted to welcome this. I think it's really helpful, you know, to bring this into the fold and to have a better understanding of how the training is developing. It's a pretty crucial time with a lot of change happening in the optometry. And so thank you.
Okay. Jill?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to echo, I was going to say the same sort of thing, Ruth. It's really nice to see the update on optometry as well. I've got the question I've got really relates, I think, to optometry, pharmacy, and dentistry to a certain extent. So, and it links to the paper later on in terms of placements and reading. I'm pleased to see that it looks as though there will be significant capacity created for in optometry, but there still feels quite fragile to me in all the professions about the placements and our ability to make sure that there is no delay in people coming through the qualifications. So it's a general question really that applies to all of them. So perhaps, you know, and you can pick it up in the placements paper as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to highlight that, and it's a constant theme of challenge for us across all of our professions, I have to say. And you know, it's applied to medicine within foundation. You know, every year we have potential oversubscription, so suddenly we got to find placements for them. and it works the other way as well, that if we guarantee placements and we look at that, say within dentistry, we have placements ready for a foundation doctor to go into, and then it's not filled. Well, those dental practices have put infrastructure into that they're committed to. So we end up having to support them in the understanding they'll have a foundation dentist later on in the process. But that, in a sense, is an ongoing cost that we wouldn't really want to have. We want, if we're supporting a practice to have a placement, we need to fill the placement. And hence within dental, I'll come on to it, is we've got the local recruitment package, which is trying to address that. So I think you're right, it's a real challenge for us within pharmacy. We can get plenty of placements for foundation pharmacists in primary care and in the community. Our challenge is in secondary care, because that's a crucial part of their rotation, and that's our limiting factor there. So in our commissioning meetings, we're encouraging all of the health boards to consider the numbers that they have and consider the placements that they could offer, because in pharmacy as well, we're also asking them to take undergraduate placements as well. So yes, you're right to raise it, and it's a constant battle and it's a constant part of our work.
Okay, is that any other questions or comments? So Push, in relation to the appendices dental update, and you've covered off that now in that section, is that right?
Yeah, the good thing that I wanted to report in dental is that where we've had historical difficulties in filling posts, particularly in rural areas, that has been largely addressed by having a local recruitment process alongside our national recruitment, and many thanks to Kirsty and her team for one, thinking of it, and two, implementing it, and getting people who want to come back to Wales, who've done dentistry elsewhere in London and in Liverpool, to also come back and have an opportunity to come back to Wales and work in the area that they want to. So I just wanted to highlight that as a positive, and the work that Train Work Live are doing alongside us. So from a pharmacy perspective, the only thing I'd like to say is there's good outcomes coming from our pharmacy technicians. All of them have claimed their certificates between 2020 and 2022. We're in the process of recruiting for foundation pharmacists for this year's recruitment for 23-24. And we're entering 113 for the national recruitment for 24-25. There are a number of trainees who we're monitoring through our case management log. 7 didn't get put forward for full registration in June. And many of these were due to late starts of their training and sickness, but some had some capability concerns as well. So they're being managed according to our usual management processes in supporting them. And the last thing is that we got step 2 accreditation with the GPHC. We submitted in March and we're waiting the outcome from them. So that was the key points from those two.
Okay, I'm well aware of time. So looking at what the committee's been asked to do, first of all, to note the areas of concern that are highlighted in the report. Note the GMC is satisfied that all areas of concern have been subject to appropriate scrutiny. Yeah. Okay. Appendix 2, dental and pharmacy, Appendix 3, and then 4, optometry. Members are asked to note the report for information. Okay, thank you. And we're now going on to 2.2, attrition and fill rates. Is that right?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I've got both Push and Lisa down for this. So who's starting?
Shall I go first, Push? Because there are two different papers at GT now, okay?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay. So the first one that you've got is attrition, and we've actually mentioned this in our previous conversation today. So this was a paper that was requested in terms of actually doing a deep dive into the attrition rates across our programmes that we currently commission. And what you actually find here, and actually this does actually touch base onto the previous conversation about the digital task and finish group, where we're actually looking at, the outcomes of the data that we currently captured. But what we actually sort of did find really is that attrition and fill rates, it's been traditionally captured, but as we actually looked into this, there was a need to define what attrition actually meant. And what this paper actually does describe to you the various definitions of fill rates, but it was important that we as HIW came up with what we believed to be an appropriate definition. And it's fair to say this is something that we've explored and researched across the UK in terms of is there one fundamental definition for attrition. So what we've come up with within this paper is as you can see in method 2, what attrition rates we will be using and what the definition is going to happen. But this is the start of understanding where we are with our attrition rates and capturing the data so that it better informs the quality of our education going forward. And as you can see, there are historical attrition rates, but this is about us putting it on a foundation where we now understand what that attrition means, engaging with our universities to understand this better. So I'm going to bring in Martin here to expand on this slightly so that we can understand this better and what this is telling us. Martin.
Thanks, Lisa. It's really important we capture attrition on graduating cohort because that's our pipeline into the service, and it's important we see how many students have not graduated onto the register. But as a measure and a performance measure, that's pretty out of date, because you're looking at students that's now started in 2019, graduated in 2022. Some of them would have an extension as well. Some of them would have gone back a year. So it doesn't tell you much about what the university's current performance in terms of attrition is. So that's why we've looked at annual attrition as a measure as well, i.e. the number of students that universities had at the start of the year on all the cohorts, and the number they have at the end of the year, who's dropped out, on which course, in which year. And then all of a sudden we've got, and this is being collated really nicely with the digital colleagues through the BI dashboard, it allows us then to challenge those universities and benchmark them, not only against each other, and we can look at best practice and what's happening and share that, but it helps us then inform budgetary decisions, financial positions in year, and future budgetary forecasts based on it. So the annual attrition is a really important measure for us, which gives us an up-to-date position on where universities currently are, and it helps us to monitor that improvement, or in some cases deterioration, so that we can proactively challenge and manage. So that's why you've got the two different figures. We don't want to lose sight of the graduating cohort because of the pipeline, etc. But the annual attrition is something relevant to this year now. So I hope that helps a little bit. What we're going to be doing in the future, and as the dashboard develops further, is we'll be able to give you percentages, because sometimes numbers on their own can be a bit misleading, because, for example, attrition of 60 could look worse than attrition of 50, but if that 60 is against 1,000 students and the 50 is against 200 students, then that can be misleading. So this is a work in progress. It's developing as we gain a deeper understanding, and it's also allowing us to ask questions of the universities and challenge them in ways. For example, I mentioned in the closed part of the meeting the challenge with Bangor University around the data cleansing they're currently doing now around students that shouldn't have been in the system on interruptions of studies and should have been taken out of the system before. So it's allowing us to ask an awful lot of questions, but at the same time, it improves our data and the information flow to our execs and to yourselves.
Okay, Martin, thank you. I'm well aware of time. David?
Yes, to do with time, so if I could just gently remind colleagues that they can assume that members of the committee have read the papers. So we don't need to go through into the papers in any detail, just a brief introduction so that the committee can focus on monitoring and scrutiny, please. Thank you.
Any questions or points with regards to 2.2? Jill?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I'll be unconscious of time, so I will be brief. It's linked to the questions earlier. I suppose my first question is, have we looked widely at other universities and HEIs, Martin, to see whether there is anything that anybody else is doing better across the border to try and influence the ones that we work with? And I'm not suggesting that we're any worse, but, you know, always looking for good practice in any of the other HEIs. And it's still on the second question was still on the same question. I'd still like to see more financial modelling in terms of the financial aspects of the decisions and the what the data is telling us. So, you know, more links with the financial information, perhaps going forward, if that's possible. So, is that quick enough, Dav?
Okay. Thanks, Jill. I'm going to ask John and then Ruth, and then if you can come back, Lisa and Martin. Thanks.
So, Chair, I just want to reiterate the point around the percentages, Martin, because when we look at the table, it would provide a very different picture if we were given percentage of either the method 1 or method 2 annual or end of year, and that what we've got in front of us in terms of that histogram is very misleading, when actually if we measured that against commission numbers, it could well be that one university only get 10 and they've had 8 people, you know. So I think the percentage is absolutely critical.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Ruth?
I just wanted to ask about the data systems that underpin this, because it just seems to me if we've got the definition and agreed and a better understanding, then you know, it asks for a single, simple, consistent data system on a Wales basis that would extend beyond the graduation and actually track maybe a 2-year outcome for graduates. So in a way, it's a comment as much as a question.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Shana, you wanting to come back on some of this? Okay.
Yeah, just in relation to John's point, the dashboard will include percentages, and yeah, we recognise that. We'll pick up Jill's point about the financial modelling. In relation to Ruth's point, we are doing some matching on students to be able to link this to ESR data. We're not at this moment in time re-procuring a whole joint system, but we are matching data. We're also looking at bringing in data streams automatically from UCAS and also the HESA, which is the Higher Education Analysis Authority, are bringing some of those data sources in, and we will explore, because I don't know the answer here today, whether that includes benchmarking, to go back to Jill's point about other universities and attrition rates, but that's something we can pick up on.
Okay, and Martin, if you can be brief, please. Yeah,
just picking up again on Jill's point about best practice from across the border, there's some really good predictive modelling tools around, i.e. what students will drop out and when they will drop out, and we are working with our universities to implement these in Wales, because they can then target those students that are struggling and help them on the courses.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other comments? There's one question from me, Martin, and that is in relation to the attrition rates. When we look at attrition, if students leave at the end of first year, do they leave with a healthcare certificate? do they leave at the end of year 2 with a diploma? And if so, are they employable within the health service? Because we're training people at band 1 to 4. And if they are leaving, having gone through accredited program at level 1 and level 2, are we actually utilising that so that they're still giving or have the opportunity for employment? I think when we talk about attrition, it'd be helpful to look at that and see whether we can capture that data.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? No. So if the committee is asked to endorse the attrition reporting methodology, note the development of the business intelligence dashboard, note the impact of COVID on nurse attrition, note the high nursing student attrition in Bangor University, and the Education Commission Quality Team are investigating this in July, and we've already heard about that in detail, and note the reducing attrition rate in midwifery. Yeah, okay, thank you. Moving on to 2.3.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be really quick, I think. So the cover paper for the medical fill rates gives you the overall figures of recruitment for foundation round 1 and round 2. Just say round 1 is for core training, round 2 is for specialty training. And these percentages have been fairly consistent for several years. What has changed is the total number of posts that are in the system. So it's been discussed already, but the actual numbers of people who are now being trained in Wales has gone up significantly, whereas the percentages have roughly remained the same. There are some areas of concern which are highlighted in the bullet points on bottom of page 4 and on page 5. So I'm happy for those to be raised by members as needed. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. So members are asked to receive and note this update. Yeah. Okay, thank you. 2.4 placement capacity. Is that you, Lisa?
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Actually, this is a paper which members actually asked actually to receive actually this report. This report is actually quite comprehensive and describes the work that we're currently undertaking in order to improve our placement capacity. Because as we are all aware, actually, that actually underpins the improvement of quality student and trainee education. So given actually this is quite we're actually short of time, I'd actually take this actually as read and any questions. I have actually got Simon on the call as well, so that if there are any questions, he's available as well to answer.
John.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask a question, there's a note within the paper, Lisa, that talks about the issue of placement for physician associate and the challenge that we're facing, particularly around the funding model. Now, I don't want to go into details about that with you, what it is. What alarmed me about that is, as an organisation and as a board, we are exposing ourselves to potential risk associated with this, because this particular professional group are picking up that medical placements are being funded, physicians associates are not, and therefore we're facing challenges. We're looking at potential models of funding, it says. So if we start that sort of process, it just alarmed me to think, well, where would this lead if then we're going to be creating a situation where there is greater expectation? Or am I being a little bit too anxious about something that may not occur if we're going to get appropriate quality placements?
Okay, John, thanks.
So can I bring Simon in for that one? Because the the quality placement issue is actually right across the board, actually, in terms of all our disciplines. And of course, we are approaching this from a multi-professional approach. So,
Okay,
Simon, do you want to address that one?
Yes, no, you raise an important point, John, and I think we are also very aware of any precedent to be set, really, because the physician associate sits within our commission programs, and yet they're sourcing placements within medical situations where we've got medical students who are being funded at the same time. So we've had very close conversations with particularly the Swansea University lead there of the physician associate program, and we're trying to balance sourcing and helping and supporting seeking placements with the issue of funding, really, particularly in secondary care, because you know, that opens up a bit of a can of worms. So we've also had discussions about within HIW, where does the physician associate program sit, and you know, we have got planned meetings coming up shortly to further discuss that. Because, as you say, it's frustrating from the program manager's point of view, program lead's point of view, when they're trying to source placements and having some sort of pushback on those because of the funding issue. So it is a complicated one, and very, very conscious of the precedent setting, where there's any attached funding to the commission programs, because, of course, that doesn't apply to any of the others.
And that is the point, Chair. That is the key thing around precedence.
Vitally important point, Simon, in relation to all the other professional groups and the placements we have and the cost that could potentially be afforded to that. So again, that could come back to this committee with an update at the next meeting if possible. Okay, Jill?
Yeah, very briefly, it was just to pick up that multi-professional approach and how we see the whole picture, the strategic picture for placements right across the piece. So where does the accountability lie? Is the placement team all working as one, as it were, the facilitators, and have we got a whole picture for what the demand is across the piece, including all the professions?
Thanks, Jill. Simon, is that you or Lisa?
I think Simon can answer that one.
Yeah, I suppose there's 2 points there. One is that because we have all of the professions sitting within the HIW umbrella, one of the things that we've established is a multi-professional placement board. We've recently sort of revamped that board, that we would have papers coming into that central mechanism that will provide the assurances around placement capacity and placement quality. So we've got that mechanism. In relation to the practice education facilitators, historically they've concentrated more on nursing and midwifery than allied health professions and health. Well, there's some in healthcare science, but there are equivalent roles in pharmacy programs and in medicine as well. So in Q2, we've got a piece of work to look at alignment of those potential practice education facilitator roles or type roles, because they play an absolutely critical part in facilitating and looking at innovative placement capacity generation also as well. So they're critical to us, and we have a very close connection with all of those across the regions.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay, thanks. I noticed, Alex, you've got your hand up, and then Lisa, come back to you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And I think just to go back to John's original comment, really, I think this is potentially a can of worms, but it's a can of worms that's been created historically. And every time we come to do something new, we are dancing around trying to be consistent with something that's not consistent. So I think we just have to, and you know, we have to be brave enough to get into that can of worms and put the funding arrangements for all of these different things on a bit more of a consistent basis, so that when the next thing comes along that we need placements in or for, there's actually a lot more logic to it than currently, where, as you say, there's the danger that we're making precedents or following precedents that have only happened in one profession and aren't actually precedents for how we want to do things. So we did start quite a substantial piece of work on this last year, and certainly that's something we'll be digging back out now this year and making sure that we do develop, because in the primary care setting, that's been a key issue for us when we've been looking at the primary care academies, for example. And it is important that there is that rationale as an organisation that the board can say we are being visible and transparent about how we're doing this. So I'm not sure whether September is realistic for that, Tina, in all honesty, but certainly during the course of this year, happy to bring a paper back on that.
I think that'd be helpful. I'd like to keep it on the agenda so that, you know, it's not lost in the abyss, or from the
it's not lost in the abyss, I can assure you.
The issue of concern there is also the value added from third year students in their degree programme and the amount of work they do in those placements with regard to their management modules and things. So it's not just about the practice providing the placements, also the value added that senior students give back in terms of some of that workload. So Lisa, from your perspective?
Yeah, I was just following on at in a way from Simon and probably Alex as well, really. So therefore, Simon has described that we've got a programme of work around this. This is part of our MTP objectives really going forward. And it was just clarifying as to, given that programme of work will be reporting, etc. And I agree with Alex that September is probably too soon. But is that, it was clarifying what was the ask from this particular group coming back in that report?
Clarifying what was asked, I think John's commented about the precedent being set for cost for placements and the risk to the organisation, that if we start to introduce it for one particular group, then
and I'll add to that as well, because we have got sort of risks versus where we are on the border with England as well, so that causes us significant risk issues as well. So we'll bring that back, but it might not be September, Tina.
Okay, well, let's keep it on the agenda, and if we can put it on the agenda in September to say that when you plan for this work to take on place, so we've got an update of it going forward, so we know the expectancy on the work programme. That'd be great, thank you. And I think that's reasonable, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. So 2.4, the committee is asked to note the report. Okay, I understand, Ruth, you have to leave us now. Yeah, is that right? 1:15. So apologies that we're running over, but thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to 3 strategic matters. Lisa, is this you?
This is actually just a highlight report that is received by members at each of our meetings. So this is actually to bring you up to date on where we are with strategic review phase 2. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions in relation to this? No, okay, so the committee's asked to note this report for information. Yeah, okay, thank you. 3.2, Lisa?
Yeah. So I'm very pleased to bring colleagues onto the call as well, in Julie Narlin. I'm quite pleased to say this is the 5th year that HEIW has developed a national education and training plan. And as you are all aware, this is a statutory function of HEIW. What I will do is bring Julie in, because I understand that the document that you've got and that was submitted to you, there has been a further update to this. There has been extensive consultation and stakeholder engagement on this particular plan for this year, and we've had responses back. It has been socialised extensively, and it actually does convey what the strategic risks are across Wales, etc., as well as us as an organisation. And we are asked to recommend the education and training plan, including all the appendices, which Julie will update to the board for approval. So if I can just bring Julie up to date with, there are some very slight changes to the document that you've got in front of you. So Julie, can I share with you?
Yes, thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. So just to share, as Lisa mentioned, we've done an extensive engagement process, and as it noted in the cover paper for today, there may be some amendments to the plan in response to that final feedback. We completed our feedback engagement sessions last week with the partnership forum on Thursday, and some very helpful feedback from the executive team as well. So I just wanted to verbally update the committee on some of the amendments that we've made to the wording as we finesse the final version as it goes into board. I just want to reassure that there's no changes to the recommendations, there's no changes to the finance plan. And what I'll do is I'll try and succinctly just summarise some of the changes to the wording in places. So for example, if we turn to the actual plan on page 5, which is the executive summary, we've added a sentence to reflect the fact the Welsh Royal College of Professional Bodies published their briefing, the People We Care, the Welsh Health and Care Workforce at 75. So we made a reference to that and the fact that demonstrates the critical need for investment in education and training and reinforces the importance of the workforce strategy. We felt that was an important thing to add to the summary. And we also felt it was important to include a little bit of information about the stakeholder engagement we've undertaken and the fact that we've been working really closely with our partners in the development and shaping of the plan. So we've added 3 sentences to the executive summary, basically saying it's central to the development of the plan and to reference the Appendix D, which summarises that information. So we just wanted to make it a little bit clearer up front in the plan. There's been some minor changes in chapters 2 and 3, replacing things like health boards with NHS organisations on page 11 and 13, just to demonstrate the scope of this plan and to recognise it's not just health boards for our partners in this. The key change I just wanted to flag, and it's an amendment to chapter 3. On page 14, we had some feedback that people would like more information about why we're maintaining adult and learning disability nursing. So we've added a sentence there about the work we're doing around learning disability nursing to support initiatives to raise awareness of that. And the key change as well I wanted to just note is that we have a section currently on page 26 of the plan, 3.9, which is innovation and transformation, which included our PA recommendation, our GP nursing, and our CAPS. We felt actually on reflection that we are innovating and transforming across the professions, and we didn't want to reduce the appearance of that or to not reflect the fact that we have new areas of work and activity in each of our different professional areas within chapter 3. And we also found that perhaps people weren't able to identify some things like our placement activity, which is, we just discussed, is so important because it didn't have its own subheading. So just to make sure that information in the plan is really clearly understood and really clearly identifiable, we've replaced the name of innovation and transformation with MAPS. We've put the CAPS recommendation in the healthcare professional section, and we've put chefs and PEFs and the placement work in its own subheading and 3.2L. So what we've looked to do is just to make it a little bit clearer and more succinct before it goes to board to make those final finessing recommendations to the wording. And the last thing I just wanted to point out is that we felt it was important to talk about value for money. So in chapter 6 of the finance plan, we've added 4 sentences on value for money and how this plan recognises the impact potentially of investment on things like spend against agency and locum staff to cover vacant posts. So we've added that reference into the finance plan as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Well, there has been extensive consultation, as you said. I've attended some stakeholder reference group meetings and things. Julie? Sorry, Ruth?
Well, only to say that I just totally support this. I think it's an outstanding document, and listening to Julie's amendments, I think they all to me sound very sensible. And the nature of this as a collaborative stakeholder product, it comes through very clearly, just to support it.
Okay.
Chairman, I'm going to have to leave in a moment or two. Apologise of another meeting, just to let you know.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Ruth. Julie, I was going to say that the participation, the feedback was superb, I thought, in some of the stakeholder reference groups. So congratulations on absorbing some of those within the document. There's just one comment on page 50, under the members of the stakeholder reference group, you need to add the Royal College of Nursing. Okay, they're missing. Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments? So the members are asked to recommend the Education Training Plan 24-25, including the appendices, to the board for approval. Do we have your agreement? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for all the work that's gone into that, because it's been tremendous. Right, moving on to 4.1 and Can't see David.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Committee reviews its terms of reference every year. So therefore, it's good practice that we do this. So therefore, terms of reference has been attached to the paper, and we ask the committee to review the terms of reference and to agree to the contents of it. So that this can go forward to the board in July.
Okay, thank you. So are there any comments or points or questions? John.
Thank you, Chair. David, can I just question, and again, it might be my ignorance, but in terms of the committee, when I read through the terms of reference, there's 2 points that I noted, and it's for the committee to say whether this is right or not. But is one of the purposes of this committee also to deliver our functions that ensure continuous quality improvement, particularly around improvement plans, because we see improvement plans, that they've been developed and that they've been monitored. And I see a lot in there about quality of education, but improvement is a key word for us as an organisation. And I just wonder that one of our functions as a committee is to assure board that we are delivering on those functions in relation to commissioning, education, etc. That there are plans in place. I haven't got a form of words, but that we're supporting that continuous improvement process. Just a thought.
Yep. Thank you, John. That's really helpful. And in fact, that's something that I think that the committee has been doing in any event, but I think it'd be good to amend the terms of reference to reflect that. In addition to that, obviously, it's very consistent with regards to the duty of quality, and we have received a draft version standing orders from our government, which so we're expecting that there will be an update to our standing to the model standing orders of all NHS organisations across Wales to reflect the new duty of quality. So to make that amendment would be consistent with that as well. So I completely accept that, and I'll come up with some wording that reflects what John has just suggested.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So inclusive of the comments that John's just made and David, you making changes, are we able to review and agree the terms of reference? The draft committee annual report? Oh, John, yeah, you're happy with that? Okay, thank you. And committee members are asked, oh, you're going to do the annual report, David, yeah? Okay.
Yes. Okay, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi, Cadeirydd. Felly, mae'n ymarfer da, of course.
Thank you, Chair. It's good practice, of course, that the board together its annual report. The annual report looks at the work of the committee over the course of the financial year 22-23, and the objective is that we put the report to the board for issuance in the July board meeting. So therefore, we asked the committee to look at the content of the report and recommend that it's put forward in front of the board in July, please.
Thank you, David. Are the committee members raising any questions or any points of clarification? No. Okay, so are you happy to approve the annual report 2022-23 for submission to the board for assurance?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully we'll be finishing the committee soon. It's been a huge amount of agenda, but very important discussion. So moving on to part 5 for information. And it's a verbal update from me with regard to the stakeholder reference group that was held on the 9th of May. I only feedback in relation to the elements that are peculiar to this committee because the board gets the stakeholder reference group feedback. And from the information that we had at the stakeholder reference group, the implementation of the digital and data strategy, excellent presentation given by Sian, and the areas in relation to Mission 2, the digital ready and skilled workforce, was discussed. It's within the plan, and that's something that we have heard in many of the reports that we hear. So going forward, that is something that the committee will want to keep abreast of the updates and changes. Looking at the vision for primary care that was presented by Dorothy Edwards, there are a few areas on that that are peculiar to this committee. One is to be primary care workforce to be delivered by a multi-professional team. That certainly has an element of generalist skills and the commissioning of education, with a greater focus on skills rather than roles. So looking at the professional areas of training that we're seeking to commission is part and parcel that's reflected in that document. And looking also at the commissioning and of education, that the engagement that we have with regards to the strategic reference group, we're informed of the involvement of the education committee, ECQC. So as a consequence of that, one of the areas that I do find immensely helpful is when you're attending the stakeholder reference group, the complexity of some of the information that's given and the high level strategic discussions that take place are reflected and fed back by the executive team to the board. So I find the stakeholder reference group immensely helpful in providing support for the things that we have addressed, but also highlighting some areas that we're seeking to develop. So it was excellent meeting and well attended, albeit virtually. Thank you. So moving on to 5.2, committee self-assessment action plan. Board Secretary, over to you again, David.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd.
Going to great detail on this. The committee looked at the results of the self-assessment in the last meeting back in March. What we have here is the action plan that comes out of that process, and therefore we ask the committee to approve the action plan, please. Thank you.
Okay, so any areas that you want to raise with David or highlight? Okay, so committees asked to note the Education Commissioning Quality Committee Self-Assessment Action Plan, which was this Appendix 1. Okay. And I'm moving on. I know that there's an item of any other business, which was mental health procurement. And I believe that's, I know it was a new paper added. And I think Ainsley, is Ainsley still?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Ainsley, over to you.
Thank you. So the papers to note our intention to undertake a procurement of over £250,000, and it's with regards to the commissioning of an external agency to oversee the creation of a suite of learning e-modules for the Tedeschi platform as a key deliverable in the mental health workforce plan. And it's required due to the scale and pace that's needed and an ability to manage it within existing capacity. So it's just a paper to note. And any questions?
Jill?
Yeah, really quick. No problem with the paper or agreeing it, but it was a question really for David as to if it wasn't an education and training contract, does it come to the right committee? That was all. Should it have gone, because procurement in its sense other than education training generally goes to the audit committee, but I've got no difficulty with a paper or agreeing it. So it's just a question whether it was at the right committee. That was all.
David, do you want to come back?
Yes, just to confirm, yes, it has come through the right committee. It should be coming through this committee for noting, and then it'll then come through to the board for consideration as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay, so the committee's asked to consider and note this paper for information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, having gone through quite an extensive set of agenda items and also due diligence in relation to some of the questions asked, apologies for running over, but we have done that. And on behalf of the committee, thank you to all the staff and for those that have attended the committee for the first time, because there's been quite a lot of discussion points, but very, very important areas for us as a committee to review. So on behalf of us, thank you very, very much. And the date and time of the next meeting is Thursday, the 14th of September. And Alex, thank you too for your annual coming to this committee. Okay, so.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Okay, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you.